Welcome to another episode of the Asset Mindset. We are stoked for our guest today, Peter. He is a BMX stud, he's a real estate investor, and he's a business owner. And we are stoked to have him on here. Benjamin Bolingbrook actually found him. So, Ben, I don't know what you're doing, how you're living right, but I'm proud of you. How are things going?
It's good, man. Me and you are both working on a few deals right now and making some progress. I sent out a offer this morning, so hoping to get it signed. So good things are happening. You just got to stay consistent, I guess.
That's true. I actually am supposed to be getting on a call with some attorneys today about another deal that we have under contract in Colorado. So we've got a lot going on. It's exciting. So,
Yeah, it's exciting.
Peter, thanks for being on here, man. We are stoked to have you on here. Let's just start. Let's just start with a bang, dude. BMX. You're a freaking BMX star. Can you walk
Uh,
us up to that? Can you give us a little background?
that was definitely my identity for 12 plus years, I think. And back then, as a youngster, that's all you can think of. You think that that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So you can only look into the next session or to the next time that you're hanging out with your buddies riding around. But it was just a pretty simple story as far as how I got into that sport. I was always just riding my bike around the neighborhood, jumping off curbs, skinning the knees, and putting different bikes together in a very jerry-rigged way. And it was kind of funny actually because I kept how I remember it is I didn't actually know that such a thing as BMX racing existed. I just thought that there was something where it was, people would get together and go hang out and ride bikes. So I kept bugging my mom to like find something that had to do with BMX, I guess. And after a few months of me bugging her, I guess there was an ad in the local newspaper for the local track, which just so happened to be 3 miles from my house. And it was right next to the Little League courts. I did the whole Little League thing for about 2 weeks, and I am not a I'm not a good guy with sports, ball sports, basketball, football, baseball, tennis. I mean, you name it. My hand-eye coordination is just non-existent. And so, anyways, went down to the BMX track and got hooked. I did that for a little over 12 years, I think, full on. I was labeled as a semi-pro. I didn't want to go fully pro just because basically the amateur class was just as hot, if not hotter, than the pro class. And to become a pro, all you had to do is sign your name on a piece of paper. So it wasn't all that. But as a semi-pro, you could retain your amateur status yet still compete in races for cash. And that was sort of the way that I handled it. So I never wanted to go fully pro unless I was actually ready to be competitive on the Olympic level. So I got up to the top of the state, and I got to the top of the local and the state scene, and I couldn't make any headway on the national circuit just because our tracks weren't the best compared to the national level tracks. This was up in Northern California, so it was always raining 6 months out of the year, and our tracks
Yeah.
would literally get flooded under 10 feet of water because it was in the lowest spot of the area. So all the water from the river, everything drained into it. So I could only really train or effectively train 6 to 8 months out of the year. And after a year or so of just getting creamed on the national circuit, and I'm like, I need to, like, I'm never going to get to where I want to be. My goal is to get a national title. Someone from our track was like, oh yeah, no one from here is going to get a national title. And I was like, bet. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, what needs to happen for me to do that? And the obvious reason was to move to San Diego, which was it's about a 660-mile straight down south. And they had the Olympic Training Center there. They have year-round training weather. It's considered the birth of BMX, so to speak. And so I remember one weekend, I left work on a Friday, drove straight down, spent my entire paycheck on gas to get there and back on 2 days, and just handed out every resume I could to local bike shops because that's what I was doing. I was working at a bike shop, so that's all I had really to go off of. And came back, did the follow-ups. Nothing came of it until about 2 months later. I got a random phone call early in the morning. And long story short, I was in San Diego within 48 hours, and that started my journey. Came down here, got started, got established, got my national title, and learned a lot of learned a lot of lessons along the way. And I picked up some real estate along the way, which wasn't my intention to get into real estate investing whatsoever. I was just focused on BMX. The real estate was just kind of like a byproduct to help me get to my
Yeah.
goals in BMX. So it was just a little bit later after I'd hung up the bike that I went into real estate full time and just dove straight in. So that's
What
the
what
story of how I got from there to here.
what part of California were you in?
Mendocino County. Yeah, I grew up in
Mendocino.
Mendocino County, Ukiah to be exact. So
Okay.
we were right in the kind of right, almost in the center of the Green Triangle where all the good bud was grown before it went, state level and federal level and institutionalized. So that's what we're
Yeah.
known for. It's like, oh, that's where the good leaf is grown. I'm like, yeah, well, but yeah, that's where I'm from.
Nice, nice. Okay, I lived out in Sacramento for 2 years, so I served the
Rad.
church mission out there, and it was great. I loved it. It was an awesome spot. So that's cool that you're up there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Went to Roseville quite a bit. They had some sick tracks. They actually have a top caliber track in Roseville. So I was there often, and Sacramento's a great spot. Oh yeah.
Well, cool. So I loved what you said earlier about, hey, BMX, that was my identity. And you now, have something else that you've taken on. And I'm excited to hear about that. So let's, before we dive into some of the real estate, I'd like to unpack, or let me ask you this, was the real estate or was the entrepreneurship first? Which came first, or did it kind of come at the same time?
I would have to say the entrepreneurship came first. It's just I didn't know what that was. I had heard the word before, but I had no
Okay.
idea what that meant. But yeah, because I did start a rideshare business. I had a few other little money making things on the side as far as teaching kids, coaching. I had my own little. I guess you could call it a coaching business, but I would create ads, run ads, and hold camps to teach kids how to ride their bike better. And that was my first way that I made money way back then. But again, never. I didn't even know what the word entrepreneur was. Heck, I didn't even know what real estate investing was when I bought my first property. Like, again, totally not a forefront. So yeah, I would say entrepreneurship came first for sure.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
cool, man. What was your timeline? So you moved out of your parents' house at 16. You went full on into BMX at 19. You started a company at 21. Where did the national title come in, and then also where did the your first property come in?
So the timeline was, yeah, I moved out of my parents' house when I was 16. We were button heads pretty hard, and I had an opportunity to move in with a high school sweetheart, and we had a little studio. I remember paying, I think it was $400 a month in this little studio in California. We were living on our own, and I moved to San Diego. I moved to San Diego when I was 19. Yeah, see, yeah, I moved to San Diego when I was 19. And then when I was 21, that's when I bought my condo. And then when I was 26 is when I bought my next set of units, which was a fourplex. And so let's see, Ben, I kind of forget what your initial question was. So that's kind of the rough timeline. And I moved to San Diego at 19 as well.
Yeah, no, that was my question. And my next question for you is why rideshare? Like, who gave you that idea? Why did you start doing that?
How the dominoes fell. So I was at the track, and again, when you're, I mean, I was at the track 3 to 4 days a week, right? And everybody knew me. I knew everybody, and there would always be new people that come and go. And I don't pay much mind to them. I'm just there doing my thing. This one guy, this one military guy, he was there, just started out in the sport, was having a lot of fun. And he sort of latched onto me a little bit, and I would always help him out, give him some tips, and hang out. And I don't know, it was one of those people. I'm sure that you've had these before where they just latch onto you, and you don't know why, and you don't mind. I mean, cool, company's great, but soon it kind of gets like, hey, I'm busy. I can't just hang out all the time. He was doing rideshare as a way to get by, and this was back when it was first sort of starting out. So it was kind of new waters, right? And this was back when, so they were just starting out. Uber and Lyft were just getting off the ground, so they're trying to really incentivize riders and riders and passengers. So at the time, they had a new sign-on bonus for $2,000 if you gave, let's see, what was it? It was a $2,000 bonus if you gave 500 rides in 60 days. I think that was it. And my paychecks at the time were about 700 bucks. So $2,000 to me was a huge amount of money. And so this friend that this guy that kept talking to me about, he's like, "Oh man, you got to try this lift thing. You got to try this lift thing." And I was always hard up on money, and me in the entrepreneurial mindset that I had, I didn't know. I was like, well, I don't have a proper car for it. I need to get a car, but can I pay for the car payment if I do it? Like, how much can you earn? Like, I had no data to base it off of, so I sort of delayed it a little bit. And I remember eventually, I actually remember my very first ride. I got signed up, I got everything all dialed in, and I was just testing it out. So I went online and I accidentally accepted my first ride. I was not ready. My bike was in my trunk, like my seats were down. I had no room for passengers. I was like, oh no, what do I do? I was actually at the O'Reilly store trying to find a phone mount, and I get this ride request. So, anyways, long story short, these girls were cool, took them to their destination, and it just took off from there. I really found that's when I really realized the power and flexibility. And again, to me, I was making probably more than triple the amount I was making in my W-2 job from doing that. And so that's kind of when my workaholic entrepreneurial spirit really started, and I just went off from there. So once it became apparent that I was having financial issues with living in Southern California and rent kept increasing, and I was like, well, living's my biggest expense, and I thought paying rent was the stupidest thing on this planet. And so I was like, what do I need to do? I need to buy a place, a 3-bedroom, get 2 roommates to pay my mortgage, and we'll be good. So I stopped training. I stopped racing for a while. I would just wake up at 5 a.m., drive Uber and Lyft from 5 to 8, and then stop, be in the office by 9 o'clock, do a full days of work, and then get out at 5 and go straight to driving until 10 o'clock. And I would do that. I think I did that for 6 months. I got myself out of 15K in credit card debt and then saved up 20K to buy a condo. And that's how I got my first property, just literally by driving.
Jeez, that is awesome. So I'm like itching to get into the real estate, but I'm trying to hold back. So um you got into driving, you're doing that. Where does the idea or the idea, I guess, of I'm going to start my own company, I'm going to start my own rideshare, I'm going to compete with Lyft and Uber, where does that come
So
from, and what does that look, or maybe, break down what that looks like?
So that was just a little bit more than a thought. That never actually came to fruition. The business, again, so this is a brand new thing, and the city, the state, the nation has no idea how to control it. There's no laws for it. So I remember looking into the cost of a business license and T&C insurance, or commercial livery insurance, and how to expand this to get more drivers with more cars. There was one person that was in the network. We used to have these like meetups at Denny's at 3 in the morning where we would all meet up after for pancakes or whatever and talk about the rides and whatnot. And this one gentleman had his own, I guess, limo service, if you will, or TNC operation service. He had 4 cars, some Escalades, Cadillacs, and he would be doing Lyft on the side. That was like his side hustle. And this guy was really cool. He would always be supporting the Lyft community. Like he would throw out on Facebook, like, hey, if you take a selfie with my license plate and write down the date on a piece of paper, if you get 3 license plates, you'll get $100. Or if you get 7 license plates, I'll give you $500, right? So it was always a game. We would be like, I would see them. It was Juno Lux. That's the plates, Juno Lux. And I would like see the plates in downtown, and I would like turn around to my passengers, be like, please hold on, I need to just take a photo of this really quick. I'd get out of my car, sprinting after this license plate, trying to get a selfie. And those are just the kind of the games we played. So he was really cool. And I would be talking to him all the time, like, hey, what does it take to get to what you're doing? Because I'm making all this money. And I'm like, well, I just need to get more drivers and more cars and just expand this. Like maybe I can rent out cars or what have you. And it came down to it where the costs of the startups I just didn't have to buy another car. I think the insurance, the licensing and all that was over $2,000 to get everything going. And I ended up squashing that idea and not it was always in the back of my head, and I always revisit it, especially when like churro came around. I really looked in depth into that too. But nothing ever came of it. I would get these notices of fines from the city of San Diego saying, hey, you're doing this ride share, you're getting income, and you need to have a business license. And we would always just throw those in the trash, and nothing became of it. And eventually the state laws sort of caught up, I guess, to the industry, and none of that was ever needed. So as far as establishing a legitimate business with an EIN number and all of that for rideshare or for TNC, that never happened. But I always kind of wondered if I ever did follow through with it. And, even to this day, I still kind of think, hey, I always kind of keep tabs and ask, but I'm kind of too far into real estate now to
Yeah,
turn back. So,
that's
but
cool.
it would have been cool back then to have a few more cars and other drivers for sure.
That's neat.
That is cool. So you started making good money, and where did the idea of real estate come into your mind? Who did that?
Again, so back to BMX, I was like, every decision I did was more or less, well, actually it wasn't for more or less, every single decision I did revolved around BMX. So like moving to San Diego, that was solely for BMX. Buying my condo, that was solely for BMX. And so backtracking a little bit, I was intending, the way that I was doing my underwriting at the time and figuring out what it would take was, I needed a 3-bedroom condo, and I would cover my entire expenses. This was back in 2017, 2018. The market was increasing pretty quickly. And in that 6 to 8 months it took me to buy my condo, the market had increased to where a 3-bedroom was just out of my reach. And so I could only really get the buying power for a 2-bedroom. And I was pretty bummed out about that, but I was also really pissed off that I had quote unquote wasted my 6 months of not training and just straight working. And I was like, I don't want to continue to keep working and saving for a 3-bedroom. Like, I'm going to be good with a 2-bed. I started placing offers, and I finally got one accepted, a 2-1, about 20 minutes east of downtown San Diego. And once I had my roommates in place and everything, my total out of pocket cost was about the exact same as it was before paying rent, which kind of made me even more upset because in my head, I was like, well, I guess it's a little bit better because I'm paying a little bit of principal and I own this condo and everyone's telling me congratulations, I did a good job. So whatever, I'm gonna get back to racing, and that's what I did. So I got back to racing, got my national title, and then one day, about 4 years later, so this is now 4 years after buying my condo, I come home from driving because I'm still consistently driving. I'll be putting in, 40 to 50 hours a week on top of my 40-hour a week day job, driving early in the morning and late at night. So I remember I come home one night. It wasn't too late, probably 9 o'clock. I come home and my neighbors have all of their stuff out in the common areas, like all of their stuff. And I'm like, hey guys, what's up? What's going on? They're like, oh, we're moving to Oklahoma. I'm like, right now it's 9 o'clock at night. She's like, yep, husband's getting the U-Haul truck, we're gonna pack it up right now, we're leaving by tomorrow morning. I'm like, okay, well, let me help you, right? So I'm helping him load this U-Haul at 10 o'clock at night, and I'm nosy, so I'm like, hey, what are you guys selling your place for? And they told me a number that was, I think it was like 60 or $70,000 more than what I had bought my condo for, and we have identical units directly across the hallway. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, there's no way, you guys are full of it. Sure enough, went fact checked it. It sold for 70 grand more than I bought my condo for 3 years prior, and that's when it clicked. I'm like, there's no way, but that's true. That actually happened, and like, there's something here. Like this is worth it. Like, there's no way that my condo just appreciated more than I could make. And so at that moment, I dove all in. And again, I didn't even know what real estate investing was. I didn't know what house hacking was, although later I came to find out that's what I've been doing this whole time. And so I kind of really fought through all of that analysis paralysis and fought through that overload of information to, kind of find my way and figure out my path. I flew out to Ohio. My first step was I got a HELOC established on my condo because again, I was in debt by a lot just due to racing. And I flew out to Ohio, was looking at some single family homes with the intention to buy two of them. And I went out there and I'm like, man, to me, this just doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense for them to be way out here. I want to self-manage. It doesn't make sense to pay a property manager for my, my method and what I like to do. I like to be hands-on in the weeds with it. So I put a halt on that, flew back to San Diego, kind of reevaluated, changed my direction, and started placing offers on fourplexes. My goal was to FHA a fourplex, and then COVID hit. Things started going through the roof. FHA offers were getting thrown in the trash. So I said, all right, well, something's better than nothing. So I switched over to a conventional 20% down offer. And in hindsight, I should have switched from 4 units to 5 and up units, but hey, it's always 2020, and I'm not bummed about the deal that I got. So that's how I kind of morphed. And about that same time, with COVID hitting, I was already so burned out from racing. I couldn't really come to terms with that with myself, because again, that was my big identity shift, I guess, was realizing that I was never going to get to where I wanted to be in the sport, from a variety of different factors. And so learning how to be okay with hanging up the bike and checking out these other things that life has to offer was sort of the same, that was right around the same time. So I stopped doing that, hung up the bike, real estate was there and waiting, and here we are in this chapter. So
That's so
that's
cool.
how I kind of morphed from BMX into real estate.
So, Peter, are your properties in California, or are they spread out? I know you said you were looking in Ohio at one point. I don't know if you ever ended up getting one there, but where are your properties? There's 5 of them, right? Where are they all at right now?
They're all based in California. Yeah, there's some
Wow.
in Central California, and then I have my condo here in San Diego, in San Diego
When
County.
was when was your last purchase?
September of 2021.
My gosh. See, California is such an intimidating market, I think, to so many people, right? Because it's expensive, and it's all relative, right, to where you are. But you just hear about everybody leaving California, coming and they're buying these houses in Utah or Texas or Florida or Colorado or wherever, cash, and it's like, gosh, man, these California
Yeah.
people got money. So I'm just so intrigued that you've been able to scale, especially a fourplex in in California. To me, it's just incredible. So, I'm kind of curious, like, what your structure looks like as far as when you look for a deal. What does a good deal look for you? Like your returns. What are you getting on your properties right now? Are they on track to get to where you want them to be? Are they already there? What do you look at when you're evaluating these properties? What does your structure look like?
So my structure, I'm a what I would consider your vanilla value add multifamily investor, and so I just like to find properties that are performing at the floor and bring them to the ceiling. So, and to your note about that was one of my biggest hurdles, and kind of still is to this day. I'm essentially giving California my best shot. I want to do my best to make it work here. I know all the laws like the back of my hand. I have, in the 4 unit, keeping up with like our rent control, our early termination of lease control, AB 1482 statutes, like all of those things. It just kind of comes down to you just fit that into your business plan. Like here for our LLCs, we have to pay $800 a year for a yearly fee for any single LLC. And so people think that's absurd, but it's like, well, I always say we also have the biggest economy, so it costs a lot to live here, but you also have the opportunity to make a shit ton of money. Same with Uber. I mean, last week I made over $2,000 on Uber doing it on the side. And so to kind of put that into perspective, it's a give and take. And I think that investing in California has no other cons than anywhere else. It's all perspective, and it's just all the way you look at things. So I am giving California my best shot. I do like to invest in my backyard, and as far as like my current, to give you some like raw numbers on my current fourplex, I purchased it for the list price was 500, and actually no, I'm sorry, take that back. The list price was 485, and this was back when COVID was through the roof. So I bid on it 425. Did not get it accepted. It fell out of contract twice. The realtor called me, I think it was about a month later, and saying, "Hey, we've been having issues getting this property closed. I know that you're really interested before. You're third in line. you want to take another shot at it? And I said, hell to the yeah. Had to evict one tenant during escrow, had to work out some things with the seller as far as, to making sure that the lender would still lend and that the seller was basically trying to get the unit filled. And I didn't want that, but the lender needed that, right, for regulation. So we ended up
Yeah.
getting all that worked out. I ended up buying it at appraised value, which was 515. So 515 was like the final selling price on it. I moved up there myself for about 8 months and renovated all 4 units. And basically, I put about $64,000 in capex into it, and I put 20% down. So the numbers were 132,000 down, which 64,000 of that came from my condo, or sorry, 64,000 of that came from my HELOC on my condo. The other 80,000 or so I raised from a private investor, and then we put about 64,000 of capex into it. So at the end of the day, the total cash in was about 212,000, and it positive cash flowed. I wish I had the numbers in front of me. It positive cash flowed about 3 grand a month, 28 to 3 grand a month. The first year of operations, it did about 30,000. The first full year of operations, it did 30,000 in cash flow, or about a 14.6% cash on cash return. So, people always say, "Hey, man, that's
Nice.
great, that's awesome." And I say, "Well, hold on a sec." Like, and I wasn't lucky because I don't believe in luck. I just believe that luck is just when preparation meets opportunity, right? So people are like, "Oh, you were lucky because you had COVID inflation and like, more than market rents and the lowest interest rates." And I said, yeah, true. Like, would it be hard to repeat that deal in this market? Absolutely. But again, prepared for what you know for, what you want. And when the opportunity comes along, you'll know that it's an opportunity. I mean, what do they say? That an opportunity passes us by every 2 weeks. So trying to repeat that, yes, it's tough in this environment, but you make it work out. And like you say, California is expensive, but it also can give you equally as expensive returns. I mean, 10% return on 100,000 is a lot less than 10% return on a million. So all perspective, and there were some hoops to jump through, but I learned a lot in those 8 months that I was up there. I moved up there and I wanted to do most of it myself so that I could learn. I mean, I knew a little bit about construction and hanging drywall and things like that, but nothing. I mean, we took 3 of the units down to the studs. It was in really poor shape, and we ended up getting $250 above market rent per unit, plus some pet fees and some other miscellaneous income, some other income to really bump up your cash on cash.
It's interesting you say that. I've recently opened up to that idea with a lot of my units. I used to absolutely zero pet tolerance, and I realized how big of a market I was shunning because
Yeah,
like
big.
everybody's got a pet these days. And so I was like, well, if I just charge a decent deposit or up the rent, like it works out, and I just have to know, like, I'm gonna come back. So what I've started to do is I've tried to get majority of my units tiled because that's just cheating. I mean, when the
Yeah,
units are tiled
LVP,
and you have
some
a pet,
tile
it's like,
flooring. Yeah,
yeah. The ones that I don't like to have them on, or if there's like the vinyl plank or the um um any of that wood floor or carpet, because that stuff. But when it's a tile, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm accepting pets, because I mean, on some of them, you make a decent some decent coin. And I mean, yeah, they probably do something on the tile, but hopefully it's cleaned up. The worst, you scrape the grout out and you got to regrout, which wouldn't be but $25. And so yeah, that's interesting you say that. Well, that's awesome. That's really cool.
yeah. Other
So
income
Peter,
is like operationally. Other income is something that is a little bit overlooked in the operator's eyes. Laundry, amenity fees, pet fees. At least here in California, everyone's got a pet, but not a whole lot of places, include the pet. So if it's a $25 additional fee, if you have a 4 unit, 25 times four, that's $100. That's 200, $1,200 a year, and at a 6% cap, that can really boost a lot of value to your NOI.
Yeah.
that's awesome. So Peter, we've talked a little bit about all your successes, and I kind of want to touch on some of your failures and your struggles. So like in your bio, you wrote that for a long time you were unhappy and pissed off, and had some therapy sessions and went through. Kind of sounds like just a process of really like finding yourself and finding what you wanted to do, and overcoming a lot of barriers. So I just kind of want to hear from you, like what that process was like, and advice that you'd have for people who are kind of maybe in the similar situation.
Good
Deep question.
question.
You can
Very
take your time.
loaded one. Oh yeah, wondering where to start. And just as a side note, definitely still have a long way to go to become the person that I want to be. But yeah, I would say I from very early on, again, I had an Uber rider that dominoes fell where they may. She became my therapist. She was just starting her own therapy practice, and her and I clicked. And I think I've probably seen her over 120 times in the last 4 or 5 years, and she's helped me work through a lot of my mountains, as you will, because I knew that the only person holding me back was myself, and it was a very slow transition from feeling how I felt as a young kid growing up in San Diego, feeling like I was sort of stuck with all these issues, like I was at fault, and shaming myself, and not knowing, not even thinking that there was a possibility for any way out. And I kind of called it fate, right? It was like you will take something that you think that you can't control and you'll call it fate. And that's what I did. Is I was like, well, it's fate that I feel this way, that I am like this, that these things piss me off, that I have serious trust issues, serious anxiety issues. Yeah, always in my head. And I think that was probably a big factor to why I didn't get as far as I wanted to in BMX. Was my head. I remember as soon as I discovered meditation and started meditating, I made more progress on the track in 6 months than I did in the last 3 years of training. And I mean, I tracked everything, all the data, power watts, power meters, timers, you name it. I made a lot of progress when I sorted my head out. So at the very early on, again, it was really just getting through my first serious relationship, getting through my first big breakup. Those feelings of just being a very undesirable person. And I spent every last dollar I could. I always had coaches in BMX, and same thing with therapy. Is like I would stretch myself, and I'm like, okay, if I can drive extra this week, I can get another therapy session, and I can go out, take another drive. I filled up I don't even know how many of those yellow pads with notes, and I would always record all my therapy sessions and go over them, and just really figure myself out, figure out why my brain worked how it worked and why it got triggered when it got triggered. And that kind of morphed into, over time, where I am today, where I kept on figuring things out more and more as I met new people in my life and I got triggered in new ways. Really just, I guess, taking a step back and saying like, hey, like what's going on here, and why is this happening? I think we're so quick to think that it's an external thing that is making us feel the way we feel or react the way that we react. Like she did this or he did that, and that freaks me out. When the reality is it's not that at all. Everything's inside, and I made huge strides when I kind of honed in on these loops. Like basically, once I had enough time and once I had enough experiences, I started things repeating. Not necessarily the exact same things, but I started to notice these patterns, if you will. And I said, okay, like maybe this isn't them. Maybe this is really something to do with me. And I found out that through my childhood, I did. There was a lot of trauma from my childhood that I never considered trauma. I was like, oh, that's normal, or like, oh, that's everything. That's just that didn't affect me in this way. And well, lo and behold, that wasn't ever the case. And taking all the lessons that I learned from BMX, and applying them into real estate, where it's like, hey, you do need people. This isn't a single solo sport. And you do need to have friends. You do need to trust people. You do need to put effort into relationships. Finding your purpose. That was all sort of tied in with that. And once I I always tell myself, like, I just want to become the person I want to become, because just be yourself is terrible advice. Terrible advice. I don't know how that helps anybody, but just be yourself is terrible advice. But no, I want to be the person that I want to become. So if I don't want to have these feelings of trust issues, or if I don't want to feel triggered or feel this anxiety when, I think that the person I'm dating is off doing something that they shouldn't be doing, when the reality is they're doing nothing abnormal, or anything of, hey, like being addicted to work, like being a workaholic and not knowing how to find my own sense of self-worth if I'm not working or if I'm not helping people. Like those are just a few of the things. I mean, I was severely just sort of twisted once I kind of got into the spaghetti bowl of my own brain. So I'd always say, I want to become the person I want to become. I don't want to feel like that. How do I get there? And as I progressed in real estate, as I got myself more cash flow and more resources to spend on more coaches and more therapists and, more self-help things, and have more time to sort through things, I really started to see a lot of progression in becoming the person I want to become. So I'm still not there. I don't think I ever will be there. I'm sure it's a lifelong journey. But I'm definitely a different individual than I was a year ago, and a completely different individual than I was 2, 3, 4 years ago. So it's been a crazy ride, but the biggest mountain to conquer is yourself. I mean, we see all these successful people and we think that they accomplished these big things or overcame these big things, but the reality is like, we as humans, we all have the same capacity as anyone else. I have the same capacity as Elon Musk. So do you, Jordan and Ben. I mean, we all have the same brain, and yeah, we're cut from different cloths, but at the end of the day, if we can wade through all of the stuff that holds us back, the only thing that's left is just pure crushing it. So
Yeah.
so it's not
Well,
the mountain that we conquer, it's ourselves.
Peter, I believe there was an insinuation there of what you did for BMX, the physical work, the training, the paying for that. You're basically saying you're doing that same thing now, which I think is so important. It's a great parallel to draw, because the real estate game, investing, becomes a mental game, right? You're not physically. It's not like I need to go and hit the gym and get my PR up in a matter of 6 weeks, or I need to get a further distance on my miles, right? Like, we all come from a similar background of athletics, and Ben's getting there. His marathon pace is a few minutes behind mine, but I mean,
Whatever.
we all are working to grow our physical bodies. We do that whether we're competing or not, right? We just are constantly like, oh, I gotta go to the gym, or I gotta up my sit-ups, or whatever it is, run a little further. But it's like, man, when was the last time I stopped and did something for my brain? Well, I spend this money at the gym. I got a gym membership. I spend this money on diet and protein, and if you're Ben, steroids, or so, no, I'm kidding. But you spend all this money on these physical things, and it's like, well, what about my mental capacity? What am I doing there? And I think that's a great point that you bring up, is they're insinuating that, hey, like, my therapy is basically the same training that I'm doing for my mental as I was physical, what I was distributing as far as funds go for my physical BMX performance. And that's huge. I think that's really important, as poignant to bring out, because in real estate, there are so many numbers. There's analyzation, there's underwriting, there's networking, there's this mental game of taking on so much that you're not really, sometimes you're swinging a hammer, right?
Yep.
Sometimes you do a little physical labor, but really you get to the point where you don't. And that's the goal, right? You get to the point where you don't do any physical. It's all mental and intellectual. And so that's a great point that you bring up. I love that you're very open and vulnerable with that, because I think that more people could take a lesson from that alone. And you're right. We never are where we want to be. We're grateful but never satisfied, I believe, is a quote I heard recently from, I don't know if it was Kobe Bryant or who it was, but something that has really stuck with me. It's like, man, that's true. I can be very grateful and still not satisfied, and that's okay. You know.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
100%. 100%. The brain's a muscle just like your bicep. Um, and to me, it was a little bit of common
and it needs
sense. I
that
just
therapy, right? That physical therapy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, it wasn't a whole lot. It was a little bit of common sense. And I remember when I first tracked down my therapist, I think that that was the first and only topic I said, I need help to get to where I want to be in the sport. Like whatever I have a big mental game to where I could see it where in a race or in a competition, my power output would be lower, my times would be slower than what I just did the week before or what I would do after the race. And I would notice after the race how much more energy and power I had on the bike when I was just okay, like once the stress of competition's gone. And I'm like, man, how can I get, how can I feel like this after the race as I do during the race? And I mean, I tried everything. I mean, over the 4 years that I really took it seriously, I tried every trick, hired every coach I could. Just to, I felt so certain that I was going to get to where I wanted to be, and it was just a matter of time. And so once it became apparent I wasn't going to get to where I thought I wanted to be, it was kind of it was a big change. And then I also had that topic of getting through my first breakup and all those self discovery feelings. I think once once our fragile, sensitive little hearts are crushed for the first time. Um, but yeah, once I started meditation and figuring out how to control my brain, one of my high performance coaches, Fazel, he told me, he said, Peter, you're trying to solve 2x problems, but you have a 10x mind. And I that didn't really resonate with me at all. And I didn't know if I haven't listened to a whole lot of Grant Cardone stuff, but I was like, is that a Cardone reference? Like, what is that? He said, no, you're trying to solve a 2x problem with a 10x mindset. It's not going to work. Like, you don't have, your mind's a mental mind. You can't solve emotional problems. If you try to solve emotional problems, you're going to get stuck because 1 + 1 does not equal 2, and your brain's not going to know how to handle that. So figuring out sort of again my brain and how to give it rest, how to exercise it. I mean, my head's always going. I would go through weeks and months of not sleeping where it got to the point where sleeping pills couldn't even get me to sleep because I was just up and I just had to do stuff and I had to figure stuff out and I just had to know why. Like I had to know why is this like that? I had to make sure all these numbers worked. I had to make sure that the people I cared about weren't confusing me in any way, which became a big problem. And so, yeah, learning how to essentially control your mind. And before I thought that I needed to tame it, I thought I needed to hold it back a little bit. And that was one of the things about driving Uber and just driving in general. I mean, I love driving, but if you've ever driven, I mean, there would, and I'm not proud to admit this, but there would be times where I would drive more than 24 hours straight, from all through the night into the next day, because my brain would be silent. It would be quiet. And there was nothing better and more relaxing than stopping driving at 3 a.m. after all, taking all the drunks home and your brain's quiet, the world's quiet. And I just would sit there for hours until the sun came up and just relish in that peace and calm in my head. So being able to get that peace and calm in a productive time, in a productive state, has been huge. And learning how that mind works and how your brain works to really unlock yourself has been a big instrument to, I mean, that's been the key to everything, my own contentness, happiness, health, and all of it. So that was definitely an interesting journey these last couple years.
Yep. Peter, what percentage of your success in business would you say is mental? I'm just curious what your opinion is. 99?
99.9.
No, yeah, for real. And you think
I
about
mean,
like
yeah,
you think about everything we do to have success in business, like it's definitely not we're not focusing 99% of our time on like the things that bring us mental capacity and mental strength, right? So like you think of an athlete, their success in their sport, if 99% of it is mental, which, it's debatable like whether that is the truth, but obviously a large portion is mental. And how much time do they spend on those activities that actually, like improve their mindset, right? Like it's
right,
probably not
right.
99%. For most
It's actually,
athletes,
it's
it's
actually, it's
probably
actually, it's actually been proven
flip-flopped,
to be
right?
about 80. It's actually proven to be about 86%.
Yeah.
Like from
So,
college studies, because I studied that too. There is a definite part of genetics where, genetics. play a huge role, especially in a sport like BMX where it's all fast twitch muscle fibers and how much you get of those at birth and how much you can develop them. But yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to break that down even further because I'm sure that everyone hears that like, oh, it's all mental. And it's like, okay, I know it's all mental, but what exactly does that mean? And I struggled with that for a long time because you know what? I hate cliche sayings. I hate all those cliche sayings
Yeah.
because they don't do anything for me. And everyone always says them like they want to help. And at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, shut the fuck up. I need help. Like, I'm not okay. Stop saying just be yourself because that doesn't help me. And so I would always hate all these cliche sayings that I would hear. And, another one of those was, oh, you just need balance. You just need to find balance. Like, what does that mean? And to me, that was integration. I don't have work life balance. I have work life integration. Like, hey, I need to integrate rest now to crush it later. And so, what does it mean when it's like, hey, it's all mental? And again, going back to taking pause and being aware of every single little thought that comes into your head. I call them ants. Automatic negative thinking, ants, automatic negative thoughts
Yeah.
is like you'll be surprised if you sat in a room with yourself like what that other voice says in your head. If you read the book The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, he kind of goes into depth with this where it's like, hey, if someone's talking, if there's a voice in our head, which there is a voice in my head all the time, and sometimes it's really loud and it's driven me to extreme things once in a while. If there's that voice in your head talking, is that really you? Or is it someone else, right? Like this idea of a subject object relationship. And so basically being quiet and with yourself and recognizing all of your thoughts and triggers. And this takes some time. This isn't just like a once all be all. It's like, no, you start to notice these things where if someone says something, you're instantly going to think a certain reaction to it, positive, neutral, or negative. Like you will instantly have a thought. So if you're aware of those thoughts and then you say, hey, is this desirable or undesirable? And once you're aware and present of them, then you can control it. So if you have this, if someone says like,
Yeah.
oh, to be a successful wholesaler, you need to go knock on 100 doors and call 100 properties. And if you instantly think, oh, that will never work, well, then yeah, it's not going to work. So I think that being aware of the thoughts that you have, how your mind works, who you are as a person, and where those thoughts came from, because you know what they say is that if a kid was raised in a house with 5 fluent languages, he would learn all 5 fluent languages. Like we are all a direct result of how we were raised and the environment we grew up in. So getting to know that is the best thing you can do for yourself, your business, your health and happiness, and your future. Yeah, it's all mental.
That's awesome. Well, Peter, as we begin to wrap this up, I do want to ask you, what are you working on right now, and where do you see yourself, or what goals do you have set for the next, 12 to 36 months? What are you wanting to have obtained in the next few years, and what you're
Yeah, that's a
doing
good question.
right
I
now
think
to accomplish those?
Yeah, I think with anybody in today's market, my goal is to find a deal. I was recently under contract with a 5 unit that was similar to the deal that you had in I think it was Florida with kind of messing around with wholesalers and contracts ghosting you and things like that. But my goal is to just get another deal. And I really do see myself kind of branching out and becoming vertically integrated over time as I hire out more people to help me do the things that either I'm not the best at or to just free up my time to do more stuff. But, goals, I actually did away with goals because, again, learning out how my mind works, if I set a goal, especially as it relates to either real estate or, ride share, if I say, hey, I need to make $1,000 this week, if something comes up where that interrupts that goal, like I freak out and I can't like it becomes a big problem and it will be detrimental to my mental and my mental and physical health. One of my things that my therapist said was, no, Peter, the power of a plan is that it is flexible. You can change it. So I actually don't write down goals anymore. It's kind of controversial, but I don't write my goals down because I'm so confident that I'm going to get there. And to me, the cars aren't important, the money's not important, the status isn't important, the number of units isn't important. becoming who I want to become is important. Having that time back
Yeah.
to do what I want to do and spend time with the people that I want to spend time with, do more of what matters, that's important. So I guess that's a goal. But as far as the materialistic things, no, I'm just trying to find another deal. That's the only thing I'm focused on right now. I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 to 6 months or 3 to 6 years, but wherever I'm going to be, I know it's going to be in a better place than I am now. So that's enough for me.
That's incredible.
Nice. So Peter, for all of our listeners, where's the best place to find you and follow you?
Well, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can just text me, call me, 707-489-6236. That's my direct line. Would love to hear from you. On Instagram is probably where I keep up to date. You can keep up to date and try to keep up with me and what I'm doing. That's Peter Eberhardt, PeterEberhardt as my handle. And would love to hear from you if you're listening to this, and hopefully I can help you out, get past your own mental blocks or keep you started. And Jordan and Ben, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a great pleasure talking with you guys, and hopefully that we can all get some deals here soon and continue on crushing it.
That's right, Peter. I before we get off, I do gotta say that name, man, just it belongs in a magazine or something. So keep up the good work. I know you don't care about the status, but Peter Eberhardt, I don't know why. I just that's gonna be in lights. So I
There
appreciate
you
you being
go.
on here. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Did you end it, Ben?